as a worship associate. Today, I am speaking the prepared words of one of our Mid-America congregational consultants, the Reverend Dr. Lisa Presley. I hope you appreciated her sermon as much as I did. I am so glad that you are here. We welcome everyone to this home of comfort, spirit, justice, and hope. We are Unitarian Universalists. We open our service with a prelude by our accompanist, Joy Hutt. Thank you. Thank you. An important ritual in the Unitarian Universalist faith is the lighting of our chalice. Unitarian Universalists have many different interpretations of the flaming chalice, including the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope. Please join me in celebrating all of these reasons and more. If you're watching elsewhere and have a chalice or a candle lit, please light it now as we all join in saying the unison words projected on the screen. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Our opening prayer is number 416 in the Gray Hymnal, written by Robert French Elevens. Holy and beautiful the custom which brings us together in the presence of the Most High, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones in absence, to give thanks, to make confession, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened, and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of ages, the cathedral music of history. 3 unseen guests attend. Faith, hope, and love, let all of our hearts prepare them to place. Please rise in body or spirit as you are able and join us in our opening hymn, number 36 in the gray hymnal. Number 6? Did I make the mistake? Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I apologize. I looked at the wrong one. Number 6. Just as long as I have breath. There we go. Our goal each week is to consider how our weekly message connects with our UU principles. 2 principles in particular resonate this week. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Our sermon's title today is Holding Out Hope, addressing how to manage grief balanced with hope. Number 2 addresses the compassion we need to express towards others and ourselves as we navigate grief. Number 7 reminds us that we are still responsible for each other, to love and support unconditionally, and to recognize that we are not alone in our grief. This sermon resonated for me personally because my father died last year, as you know, and I'm constantly thinking about what I should be doing to grieve rather than just letting myself feel what I need to feel and when I need to feel it. So I hope that this has some nuggets for you today as we all navigate the different stages of grief that we may be in our own lives. As part of our weekly worship service, we do take time for the expression of joys and concerns or sorrows. Today there are some electric candles up here in the front, and I invite anyone who would like to light a candle representing whatever is in their heart or thoughts to come forward, practicing social distancing, of course, and light a candle. Leave the lit candle on the tray. Unless anybody has anything they want to share verbally, they want us to be thinking about, holding on to. Okay, great. All right, so let's take a moment for meditation. Please come up this side and then exit that side. Our next hymn is There Is More Love Somewhere. Do I have the right number this time? Number 95? Thank you. In the gray hymnal and projected on the wall above. So our reading today is from A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It is so uninteresting, yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty, if only they would talk to one another and not to me. There are moments most unexpectedly when something inside me tries to assure me that I don't really mind so much. Not so very much, after all. Love is not the whole of a man's life. I was happy before I met H. I've plenty of what are called resources. People get over these things. Come, I shan't do so badly. One is ashamed to listen to this voice, but it seems for a little to be making out a good case. Then comes a sudden jab of red-hot memory, and all of this common sense vanishes like an ant in the mouth of a furnace. On the rebound, one passes into tears and pathos, maudlin tears. I almost prefer the moments of agony. These are at least clean and honest. But the bath of self-pity, the wallow, the loathsome, sticky, sweet pleasure of indulging in it, that disgusts me. And even while I'm doing it, I know it leads me to misrepresent H herself. Give that mood its head, and in a few minutes I shall have substituted for the real woman a mere doll to be blubbered over. Thank God the memory of her is still too strong. Will it always be too strong? To let me get away with it. Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm happy to be here. Sorry I got in really late last night from California, so I wanted to give myself maximum sleeping time this morning, so I apologize for screaming in here at the last possible minute. So I really I loved I loved Lisa's sermon because it was helping me sort of process and think about my dad's death a year ago. And we're coming up on that anniversary of it, and it's and sort of the range of feelings that I've had, the tears, the no tears, the struggles that I felt through it. So I loved what she had to say specifically about that we are a community and how important we are together as a community to navigate this. So I will read her words and talk a little bit at the end about some of my thoughts on that. I knew I was in trouble when I lost my wallet for the third time in 6 weeks. The first 2 times, it wasn't so bad. The first time, I left it on a shelf at my local bookstore, and of course, one of the patrons turned it in. The second time, I left it at a donut shop frequented by the local police when I was one of the police chaplains. Again, no problem. The owner found it, held it for me, and then I had it back within hours. The third time, however, I was at a Wendy's on the northern border of Detroit. This time, when I called them an hour later, no one had turned it in. They hadn't seen it. So I canceled all the cards, replaced the driver's license, and did all that lousy stuff we have to do when we lose all of our important documents. Then about a week later, Wendy's called and told me they had my wallet. The money, of course, was gone, but the cards were all there. I was both relieved and frustrated. I had gone through all of that nonsense for nothing. But the trouble I was in wasn't about having to replace all those documents or losing my money or fearing for my credit cards. That was ordinary stuff of life. The trouble I knew I was in was that I had not spent any time mourning my father's death. The trouble I was in was that I was living in the midst of unacknowledged and unresolved grief. My father died the 3rd or 4th week of my brand new ministry in Southfield, Michigan in the early 1990s, my first settlement, and my dad's death was unexpected. Several years before, we thought he was going to die after a stroke, but he came through that as well as the bifemoral bypass a year after that. But this time, he simply died without any warning. It was a Friday night, and my mom was visiting from Seattle. She had left Detroit shortly after my parents had divorced 20 years before, and that Friday night we were hosting a party for her with many old friends who knew my family from when I was a child. There was no way to stop the party, so we greeted everyone with the news of my father's death as they arrived, and lifted a cold one in Dad's memory as we renewed old friendships. 2 days later, I did my usual Sunday worship service, announcing somewhere within it that my father had died. My mom went home a day or so later, and I flew out to Connecticut to attend to the details that always arise when dealing with death. I was gone a week or so, then came back. 3 months later, in December, we held my dad's memorial service once again back in Connecticut. It was a wonderful service, and I deeply appreciated my colleagues' work. Other than that short time away, it was work as usual, trying to understand the new congregation, learning more and more about ministry, getting ready for the craziness of the holidays while trying to learn everyone's name and the names of everyone's children, cooking Thanksgiving dinner, figuring out what to do for Christmas and the like. It was a crazy time, and there wasn't room for anything more like dealing with grief. So in a bizarre way, I was relieved that when I started losing my wallet, it wasn't until the midst of the new year and winter's cold. Once we got into February, I could eke out time for a few things other than a new ministry, and one of the things was losing my wallet. I hadn't lost a wallet for over 20 years, and then 3 times in 6 weeks. And, let me add, never since. I took pride that it only took 3 times before I realized something must be going on. In all the hustle and bustle of being new and starting this new ministry, I realized I had never spent any time mourning my father. So I got up from my desk, looked at the bulletin board on the church wall outside of my office, and copied down the number for the hospice support group. I punched in the number, and I made the decision to go to the once-a-week group. It was one of the best decisions I had made that year. It was one of the best decisions, and yet it took so much, losing my wallet 3 times in 6 weeks, for me to make that decision. For you see, I was dealing with grief and loss the way that we're all expected to do so, by ignoring it and hoping it would go away, or that somehow it will be all better just with the passage of time. And yet, in real life, it's not like that, even when we think it should be. Losing takes the stuffing out of us. We're always losing people and things. Not the kind of losing like losing my wallet, but the kind of losing as in death or divorce or moving away or being fired, retiring, losing money, losing dreams and ideas about how life will be or should be, and losing the way we're going. Losing possibilities, pets, friends, positions, relationships, you name it. We lose all sorts of things all the time. Some are willing losses, and others are hard losses where we might have had some degree of choice, but nothing that felt like a real choice. Some are temporary losses, and others are permanent. The words we use even are such strange words too, like lose or loss, as if we somehow misplaced something, and we'll be able to find it, pick it up, and get it back somehow. The language itself lacks the finality that we feel and we need. Over the centuries, death and loss have moved from conscious view to hidden away in antiseptic institutions. Grief is not appropriate for the public eye. Corporate policy often grants you 3 days off for the death of a parent, maybe a little bit more for a spouse, and sometimes more for a child, but generally not much more. We're expected to deal with death quickly or around the edges and then get back to our old ways and our old sense of being. Grieving has been turned into coping and getting back to normal, whatever normal is. And this is where John Schneider says we have it wrong. John was a psychologist and a member of our UU congregation in Traverse City, Michigan. He specialized in grief and grieving. For him, this emphasis on coping is all about getting back to where we were rather than the more appropriate task of finding a way to reach beyond, to move into something different, and to find transformation through the process. For John, grief was not only about coping, but also about hope, and the power of hope to transform our grief and loss and love into something that that can help us move into a future made different by that loss. There are 3 tasks, said John. The first task is to discover what is lost. We have to live into the grief to know what it feels like, to taste it, see it, color it, be moved, and touched by it. We have to know what it is that is gone, that is missing, that is no longer the same. This is hard work and hard to do, especially because lingering in our grief, as it is often called, makes others uncomfortable. We are not our usual happy-go-lucky selves, and instead we represent loss and death in its fullness and possibility. As C.S. Lewis wrote about grief, it's that sudden jab of red-hot memory when all return to normal vaporizes. But we need to know what it is that's gone. So to be able to do this, we need safe places. We need sanctuaries. The pressures of every day can get in the way, but grief doesn't just go away. I needed the space of the grief group to see not only how I missed my dad, but also how all the dreams I had about what could be or would be or might be were also torn asunder with his death. There was no longer the possibility for us to turn into best friends, for him to be the fathers knows best kind of father, dad, a part of me always wanted. I needed to experience what it was that I truly lost. This is often where we get stuck. As I said, we're not given the time and space to really sort this out, to know it, to understand it with the depth of our being, what it is that we have lost. Those 3 days off from the workplace don't even begin to touch the time and space we need to feel all that we need to feel. Understanding what we've lost takes a long time, and when we don't have that space, we can't find that space, or we can't use that space, that sometimes the grief turns into depression. Undealt with, we slide into denial, losing our wallets and land in the never, never land of not knowing our grief. But more often, grief is simply misdiagnosed as depression. It's often easier for others and for ourselves to be supported because we're depressed. There are meds for that, and today it's almost a status symbol to compare antidepressants. But there are no meds for grief. We're neither culturally attuned to nor culturally comfortable with grief. For that, we need to take the time and space to find, create, seek out, be supported by safety and sanctuary so that we can complete the task of knowing what's lost. That's the first task, knowing the fullness of what is lost. And then, after we know what's lost, we need to find and discover what we have left or what it is that we can restore. This is a time when we need to use our whole selves in the process. This step is not just an intellectual process or just an emotional process or just a behavioral process or just a values process, but a time and a place where we have to bring our minds, hearts, actions, and values to the table to see what's left. Discover what is possible. When we grieve, we're dealing with the loss and destruction of attachments to persons, beings, things, visions, ideas, and imaginings. We need to shift the focus to what attachments are still there or can be put back together again. It is a sifting through the ruins, a kind of archaeological study of the self, to see what is there, layer after layer, and what can be patched together, what can be created anew from that which has been lost. And as is true with the shattered pots, sometimes the pieces come back together easily, and other times jagged edges and whole sections are missing. But there is still something there. We discover what's left, and then we can begin to move on. This is the third task, to learn what is possible because of the loss. It is, in effect, a way of reframing, but not just as a psychological trick of words. It is not a letting go or forgetting or transcending the loss, getting better than it, but instead a transformation of the loss. It is making something different or new out of the old, something that might be more resilient, might be stronger, might be better than ever, or maybe just might be different. It is a way that we can find self-empowerment, not through diminishment of the loss, but rather through changes in us and how we see and view the loss, how we decide to move on from here. We no longer have to hold on to the assumption that life is immutable, but instead realize that anything and everything will change. And here's where hope comes in. When we begin the task of grieving, the whole world seems bleak. We're in the midst of discovering what has been lost and in the midst of discovering what is left, and sometimes we can't ever believe that things will be different, that they can be different, that we would even want them different. Hope is the furthest thing from our minds and hearts. It is at this point when we can easily be misdiagnosed as depressed. Grief and depression are very similar, except in this one respect. If we have hope, we know we're not depressed. Or even if we don't have hope, if we can conceive that someone could hold our hope until we can reclaim it, then we are most likely grieving. This is the difference, and for in depression, there is no inkling that hope exists anywhere in the world. The process sounds easy, but you all know that it's not the case. Grieving is hard, reclaiming hope is hard, some of the hardest work we do, and too often we find ourselves trying to take a shortcut, aided and abetted by our grief-avoiding culture. Yet we cannot shortcut the process. We cannot deny grief its due, or we'll find ourselves losing wallets, or worse, misplacing our sense of selves. We are never really truly done with grieving. Each loss we have brings back the ones that have come before. We touch again those early losses and also the future losses we fear as we experience our losses today. And then we learn something new about ourselves, or about that which was lost, or about our relationship to that which is lost. We go back again and reevaluate everything in the light of that new information. We revisit the old hurts, the old haunts, looking again for the ways in which we can transform, not transcend grief. We must always be able to know what is lost before we can truly see what is left and how that might be transformed. I wish I could tell you that there's a magic formula for getting through grief. There aren't any magic words, no magic wand to wave above our heads. It could be that by helping others, we can shift our internal focus. Being with family, sitting with others, countless things can remind us that even though we grieve as individuals, we don't have to be alone. I can't promise when you'll bring you'll bring back your hope or befriend your grief. But I can promise you that more often than not, others will help you hold that hope, journey with you on the road. Grief counselors, hospice, dear friends, your congregation, they can all hold your hope for you. But most of all, when you're in grief, be gentle with yourselves and with each other. Remember that not only you, but those around you may be living in their own grief. Remember that tears are not signs of weakness, that being lonely and lost in grief and loss are not unique to you alone, but something that we all share. Remember, you can find the possibility of hope. Because most of all, religious community is a place of hope. We are about hope, about holding out the hope and holding on to the hope and being the hope with and for each other in the presence of all that is holy when we need each other and that other the most. As the words of one of our hymns put it so well, joy and woe are woven fine, clothing for the soul divine. And as the hymn continues, when this we rightly know, then safely, safely through the world we'll go. So that's sort of the end of her words here. And I held on, as I read this the first time, all sorts of things came bubbling through my head. And first of all, I mean, it's not lost on me that the parallel with the grief that we have felt with some of the changes that have gone through with this church and some of the changes that we have ahead. And we have intentionally and purposefully tried to work with people to help us process whatever grief we had from the embezzlement, from losing ministers, from changes that are just going on, possibly leaving this building and what that looks like for us. That's grief. We have to hold on to that and honor that. We've tried very hard to do that. And you can see here, we've talked about our covenant, and this has been part of that grief processing procedure that we need to go through. But what also resonated for me, of course, was because my father had died, and I was struggling with how I was going to grieve because, like Lisa, I felt close to him and not close to him sort of all at the same time. And in some ways, there was a relief of some tension that left me. And then there's the guilt of feeling the relief of the tension that left me. And I love my dad, but also know that it was a struggle sometimes in our relationship. And it was hard. And so when my mom moved up here, that was one of the first massive changes. I had to make peace with what my plans were for me and the future that I had expected for myself. I had anticipated retiring in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, New Mexico, somewhere in that area, and that was going to be my life, and that's what I was going to do. And that changed because there's a lot of longevity in my mom's side of the family. My great aunt lived till 102, and my mom is 80. So, or 81 now at this point. So, I mean, if she lives another 20 years, I mean, that puts me at 79. It's not a point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up and move to New Mexico at 79. I'm at that point, I'm like, I'm settled here. I don't want to move. So I had to change. And I thought about that. It's like, wow, what's that change going to look like for me? And so instead of thinking about retiring in New Mexico, I just shifted gears pretty quickly. I was surprised. And I worked at this with my therapist. I said, I think instead of being worried about what my retirement's going to look like, I'm going to just frame it in a way that gives me maximum flexibility. So I bought an RV. It's coming next year. And I'll get to travel to New Mexico as often as I want to with my little RV. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go. But I can also go anywhere else with my RV. I don't have to be limited then to just New Mexico. As much as I love it, I can go to California to visit my friend like I just spent the last week doing. I learned how to surf, which was not easy, I can tell you. Like I said, I tried to surf. I learned. But all of a sudden, I saw the possibility of something different. So I could have mourned that and got stuck in it of what I don't have, what I can't do anymore, and mourn that, or turn my head around and go, so what new opportunities do I have now? What is different now? And what can I embrace now in the moment? And I loved her words about attachment because I'm a practicing Buddhist, because I practice that because I'm not always good at it. But as a Buddhist, for me, the attachment is the big thing. Right? We get attached to things and people and ideas And when we hold on to that for too long, it becomes a struggle for us, because then we're grieving our attachment. And sometimes we just need to let go of that attachment to whatever it is that we have. So anyway, these words really meant something to me. I would open it up for you all to share. If anybody wants to share their thoughts on this at all, I can bring I guess I can bring the microphone around. Yes, I can do that. Share. Okay, no worries. Hold on to that. Hold on to your. It's hard. Place. And in this sacred and special place, we have each other's back, and we love each other. We will continue to do that as we move forward. So, Lisa's final words here: safely through the world we'll go. Go with love, my friends, with faith, and most of all with hope. May it always be so. Our final hymn, Every Night and Every Morn. I believe it is number 17. Okay, as Nathan sends the basket around for the offering, I offer you a gentle reminder that this community of faith is supported only by your giving. Stewardship is more than just financial donations, but is also about donating time and talent to help our church. If you can't write a check, please help our church survive and thrive by offering your time to help maintain the building, make coffee and bring snacks, serve as an usher, serve on other committees such as helping with worship on occasion. Please donate as you can with your time, talent, and treasure. All is needed for our church to prosper. And I assume you've all gotten your envelope. Thank you. For stewardship. If you haven't gotten it, please let me know or let Nancy know. We'll figure out, how to get you on that list and make sure that you get your little packet from us on stewardship. You can also mail your financial gift to the P.O. Box 494 in Alton 62002, or you can give electronically through Givelify or PayPal, both of which are located on the links for which are located on our church's webpage. If you're willing to donate your time and talent, contact a board member and let us know what you'd like to do or can do to help. Give what you will and what you are able. You are a generous people. Please join with me in our offering prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. So announcements. Happy Pride, y'all. Yeehaw. It's a hot month ahead of us with temperatures rising, but Pride is wonderful, and I'm very happy. We're not doing anything for Pride here in June with the church. Our plan is to engage with Alton Pride here in in September, as well as Tower Grove Pride also in September. They're like back to back. So we're going to need volunteers to help man boots, to be a part of that, and to make our presence known, certainly in this local community, but at the Tower Grove community. It's smaller, it's easier to manage, and hopefully we can connect with some of the other UU churches who are out there trying to do the same work. So just keep that in mind as we're ready to go. We have some other announcements here. If you're a visitor and would like to visit the newsletter, you can fill out the informational flyer out there, a visitor card out there by the information table by the windows, or actually I think it's right here against this wall now, and put the card in the basket on the table. If you want a name badge made for you, you can fill out the blue name tag or request forms on the visitors table and put the forms in the basket. Are there any other announcements? Yes, please, Mary. Are we going to have, I think I emailed you. I think it's perfectly fine, and y'all would like a break back there in the tech side, so that we don't have to be here in the morning, but we would just project it 11:30. Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's fair. You sound reasonable for everybody, So we'll just take a nice, and that would be the last Sunday of the month. So we've got Claudia next week, and then the week after that we will not be here. So we'll make sure that gets communicated in newsletters regularly, signs on the door, etc. So that's perfectly fine. I know that Paula needs some volunteers to help with for Saturday, which is the 25th. So if anybody can help with that, she would appreciate that. Anything else that we need to know about? Thank you, Tom and Mark. They were looking at the plans. We're going to take a look at that, look at sort of boundary issues with the church and try to get some things resolved. As you can see, they've already started tagging things out there. So we've got some changes ahead of us. So we got to be mindful of that and get on top of that. More so, get that addressed. Anything else? All right, thank you. All right, I invite you to join me in reciting a prayer as I extinguish the chalice. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. Our closing words are by Nancy Wood, number 688 in our great hymnal. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. All right. I thank you for your service, and we'll have our post-salute now by Joy. Awesome. Thanks, Joy. So, and I want to thank Carol and whoever else helped with decorations. They look amazing. So it's fabulous. And the tree is lovely. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Join us for snacks, right? And next door.